So you join us today on the banks with Oscar Thornton, where he's in session. It's early March, things are looking really good, and I'm going to pick his brains on all things technical, tactical about his angling. We're going to talk rigs, baiting, and just, you know, your style in general. I mean, talk me into this session now. I've just joined you on the bank. I know you had a really good session last week.
Yeah.
We're back in the same swim?
Yeah, back in the same swim. Exactly where I started last Friday. I only had the one night, but it was a good trip. I ended up with 6. I looked overnight. I didn't have any sleep. Yeah. Really, really good result. Sort of came down exactly the same idea. The weather's pretty much the same. So sort of headed straight back in here, really. There wasn't really much to go on yesterday when we got here. So it seemed like a good starting point. Obviously, we've got a bit more time this trip, so we can have a decent look around today. It was very quiet last night. So I do feel like they're probably not here anymore. But yeah, we can have a little mooch around today and see if we can find them anywhere.
So 6 fish last week. Talk me through that session, because I know you had one 40-pounder in that hit, which for this time of the year, you know, early March, it's quite impressive, really.
Yeah, it's a bit mental, really. I just had the Friday come down straight after work, sort of an hour before dark, which is perfect, really, at the minute, because the birds are a bit of a pain. As soon as you spawn, they're on you, so I'm quite up for sort of getting my rods out on dark now. So I've probably got here about 5. I did have a little look around, and the fish were sort of up the top end, but weirdly they sort of had their backs out of the water and they were being a bit funny. But I did, with the weather changing, the wind was going to get up, it was going to get a bit colder. I thought they'd probably drop. So headed straight in here, main spot out there, sort of centre of the lake. It's always consistent through sort of this time of year. So I went straight in, 3 on the spot that I know really well. I've got a lot of fish off, 3 D rigs, put probably half a gallon of maggot out there. And then yeah, it was just from like 9 o'clock onwards, I was having a bite every hour, whether it was a tench or a carp. Which is a bit weird. It's like I haven't really caught a lot of carp and tench at the same time out there. It's either been carp or tench, but yeah. And it just carried on all through the night. I didn't get a wink of sleep, but it was all worth it in the end. I had a few 20-pounders, a couple of 30s and a 40-pounder, so can't grumble at that in March.
No, not at all, not at all. And I've seen the photos of the fish. That common was, that 40-pound common was lovely.
Yeah, it was a really cool old one, that one.
Yeah. So obviously I've been coming out on the bank with you for probably the last, I don't know, 4, maybe 5 years now. Yeah. You know, and I'm always drawn to your style. It really intrigues me to see how you fish, because the way you fish is kind of unlike any of the other guys we've got on the team. You know, 3 rods on a spot, big hits of bait, trying to fishing for bites, you know, and lots of bites and lots of big fish. So your style, I'm sure, appeals to a lot of people out there. You know what it is that you do to continually catch them big uns. The first thing I've got to ask you about every time I walk into your swim is those rods. You know, I've seen lots of comments on social media, you know, what an idiot, what's he doing? But they are so insanely tight together on those buzz bars. You know, I like them tight, but that is next level.
They're actually wider than other ones though.
They're wider.
I'm slowly growing up. I think by the time I hit 30, I'll probably have normal buzz bars.
So where does that stem from, you know, having them so ridiculously tight?
I don't really know. It's something, I've always done it, and I've always just carried it on. There's no reason behind it. It doesn't benefit me in the slightest. I just think it looks nice and tidy. I like to sit, when I'm just sat there not catching anything for ages, it's nice to sit behind something that you think looks nice. Yeah. I know a lot of people, yeah, a lot of people are not quite as keen on it, but.
Another thing I've got to ask you about, and I'm sure there's logic behind this, the slack lines. You're fishing incredibly slack lines, bobbins on the floor, line hanging from the tips, straight down off the rods onto the lake bed. What's the reason behind that? Is it something you've always done?
Yeah, again, it's something I've always done. The reason for it is I just want, everywhere I fish, you're fishing over humps, over weed beds and all sorts. I just want my line pinned down and like sloping over those weed beds and just flat to my spot all the time. I do get a lot of people say to me like, oh, if you get a drop back, you're not going to know about it. But where, like places like this, for instance, I'm fishing over a weed bed, regardless if that fish swims back towards me, it's still going to pull line on a tight line. Yeah. So you're going to get a bite either way. I just think they're just a lot less likely to come into contact with line. When you're fishing somewhere busy, they're coming into contact with lines all the time, and you find that they end up in places where there is no lines, where there's no people.
Yeah, sure.
So with having a ridiculously slack line, they're never going to bump into it. They're a lot less likely to think there's anyone actually fishing in that swim.
Yeah, and what line is that you're using? It looks like a fluorocarbon?
Yeah, that's a 12-pound contour. I've used that forever, to be fair.
Yeah.
Since it's come out, that's all I've used. Very rarely use mono. It's just, I use that for everything. It's stupidly strong. You can cast it really far.
Yeah.
And it takes on water really well and just sits perfectly flat on the bottom.
No issues with it just at 12 pound. I mean, a lot of people use 15 or 18, but
I've cast up tree many a time and it's a struggle to snap that.
Yeah. You mentioned last week you were fishing 3 on a spot. I assume you got 3 out on the same spot now?
Yeah, got 3 on the same spot as well. Yeah, 3 out on the same spot. Done exactly the same thing I done on Friday. Just put 3 D rigs out there, little maggot rigs, and then put half a gallon of maggot over it.
And how big's the spot? Are we talking a real tight sort of tram line to an area?
It is quite a big spot, but I fish it really tight. There's sort of, on the right hand edge of it, it's a little bit, there's a bit more of a hump on there, a bit of a clearer hump on there. So I have got 3 like really, really tight on there, and then just trying to spawn as tight as possibly can on top of them.
Nice. And are you putting rods out first, then spodding, or spodding first, rods out?
I've been putting the rods out first because, like I mentioned before with the birds, as soon as you put spom out there on you, so I've been spomming in the dark, but getting my rods out just before I lose all the light so I can see where they are landing, make sure they're bang on. And then the spom, where it makes a bit more disturbance from the water, you can still see it hitting the water, so you know you're still landing bang on the spot.
So purely to avoid any, the birds, the tufties, because it is tap clear water here, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, they've been, everyone I spoke to down here recently, I haven't been down for a while, but everyone was saying that they are a proper nuisance.
Yeah, right.
Like normally I'd normally spom my bait out first, then put my rods over the top.
Right.
But obviously, given the fact that those birds are just going to bat me straight away, it's just not worth it. Because I'll put that bait out on dark and then they're going to pick it up, and I don't want to be casting my rigs out in the dark.
I know you just quickly mentioned that you've got 3 D rigs out there. Now, that's a perfect opportunity to talk about rigs.
Yeah.
Because through the years, I've sort of seen your rigs evolve a little bit. The first few years, I know you're really keen of using a blowback rig, and I've got one here.
Yeah.
Blue Peter style.
One we tied earlier.
So this is the rig that you've used for
forever.
Yeah. And like I say, it was a rig that when I first started getting out with you, this is the rig that you would always use, whether it be solid bags or more commonly on a leg clip. Essentially, it just looks like a blowback rig to me, but
it is just a plain simple blowback rig.
I mean, the one thing I do want to mention is with your rigs, I've never seen you use a helicopter rig or a heli safe. It's always a hybrid leg clip.
Yeah.
Where does that stem from?
Just again, something I've always done. I've always used leg clips from when I started. And I don't know, I don't ever really seem to fish anywhere where, I've never fished in a situation where I feel like I need to change to a helicopter, so I've never done it.
Always seeking out those hard spots.
I fish a lot of hard spots, and then most of the lakes I fish, even if I fish in the silt, it's never a horrible silt. I can imagine it, I would at some point probably end up going somewhere where I might have to use a helicopter, where it's like really light, really heavy silt, and your lead's definitely plugging into it a lot. But everywhere I fish, it's like, even on the silt, it's not deep silt. Like, it's not like an old estate lake that's full of like 4 foot of silt, where you're gonna have to worry about it that much. And I think with a long rig, even if your lead does plug into that silt a bit, it's still gonna be sat perfectly on top of it.
So even with a leg clip fishing in silt, you think with that long rig, you're always gonna present?
Yeah, 100% always presented. And if anything, if your lead's plugged in the silt a bit more, and it's your lead clip, say, sat on top of the silt and your lead's in it, there's a lot more resistance when they pick it up, so it's even heavier. Something from the it's definitely, it just helps set the hook, if anything. Yeah, and
you touched there on heavy, the weight of the lead. Again, I've always seen you use really heavy leads, 4.5, 5 ounces at times.
Yeah.
Even when casting to showing fish, I've seen you use quite heavy leads.
Even
quite crude of you. Yeah, even stalking. I mean, I understand stalking in the edge, inline lead, but when you're out in the pond spot fishing, you're using heavy leads, aren't you? Yeah. Again, what's the reason? What's the logic for that?
Just to help hook them. Yeah. Like, just that weight just helps set that hook. Yeah. Like, obviously, they've got a lot to play with a longer rig, but as soon as that does go tight, it's going to pull straight in their mouth. As soon as they pull against it, it just pulls that hook in even harder.
So the heaviest lead you can get away with?
Yeah, basically. I tend to use a 4. I use a 5 where I can, depending on sort of what I'm using. But yeah, not anything from 4 to 5 ounces I will use when I can get away with it.
And how are you attaching that lead? How far on does that tail rubber go? And you look
only a little bit, just like only a tiny bit on there. I want it to come off. Obviously, I wanted to hit it, hook them. Then as they lift up, and it's just going to ping straight off. Yeah. Because I don't want it like dangling around whilst I'm playing them, because that will move the hook about a bit in their mouth, and then you're going to end up with a loss. Yeah, sure. So just nicked on, really.
The rig itself, we'll start with the blowback rig. As you mentioned already, you like a long hook length. I mean, that is probably at least 12 inches long, I'd say. Is there a length that you tend to go for, or is it just by eye?
It's always by eye. I never measure them or anything. Yeah. But I do, just the long rigs. I just like that they've got a lot more movement for them to play with. Yep. Like when you're fishing for real big uns, I don't know. personally for me, it's something I've always done, and when you're fishing with big ones, I just like that they've got a bit more to play with. When they're pulling away from it or swimming off of it a bit more, it's just something else that they've got. Whereas those little stiff ones, I feel like they can just spit them out a lot quicker.
Yep.
And there's just not a lot of movement there.
And then hook link wise, you know, I can see it's a coated braid.
That's £15 end trap soft.
£15 end trap soft.
That's what I always
use.
use.
It's quite supple, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really supple.
And then a tiny little bit of putty moulded sort of, what, halfway along there?
Yeah, just to help pin it down. Obviously, you can never guarantee, like your spot might be really nice and feel like really flat, but you can never guarantee it's flat. Like that just helps. You can just imagine it's sat over like a little bit of silkweed or something, just helps sit it on top of it.
Yeah.
Just pin it down a bit. I don't want it like bowed over.
Yeah, nice. And then sort of down to the hook section, I can see you've got probably an inch or so strip back there. Again,
yeah.
What's that
just
for?
A bit more movement. Just a bit when they pick it up, a bit of flex around their mouth sort of thing. It just stops. It just makes it even more supple, but without it tangling, basically.
And again, you're not measuring this before. You're not measuring how much you strip off, or you just.
Well, I've done it so many times, I can pretty much work out.
What would you say? What, 5-6 inches strip back to give you sort of accommodate the hair and the knot?
Yeah, I can pretty much work it out depending on what rig I tie.
Cool. And
like
then
when doing the loop, you can just before you tie it, I just leave about that much, probably 5 inches.
Yeah, nice. And then sort of the hook itself, you know, there's a real obvious piece of shrink tube, you know.
It just helps turn in their mouth when they pick it up. Like it's just aggressive, and it just helps kick it in when they pick it up.
Yeah, it's really aggressive, isn't it? It's almost sort of coming back on itself 90 degrees there, isn't it? Like you really steam that in it, you know.
It does close the gape up a bit, but it will just pull it into their mouth every time. I find if you do it in your hand and things like that, it always nails them.
Yeah, and then the hook itself.
Side full Kamakura, wide gape X.
Yeah.
They're just best hooks you can get. They're just stupidly sharp. I think with most rigs, as long as your hooks are sharp, you're gonna hook fish.
Yeah.
Like I'm not one to think like changing inches and things like that makes any difference, or rigs really make a drastic difference. I think it's the hooks. Like they are ridiculously sharp, especially in the X version. They're a lot like fishing on hard spots like out there. Those X's, I can reel them in off there now. They won't ding. They always stay tight. Like they always stay strong.
Yeah, I know when we were testing the, before launch of the Kamakura Wide Gape X's, I remember sending you some samples and getting some really positive feedback.
Oh mate, honestly, they definitely 100%. I used to sharpen my hooks, but they're better than you can hand sharpen them. For me personally, I think when you hand sharpen them, you end up making them too fine, and then they do dink over, and they get really weak. Whereas they stay strong, and they're just ridiculously sharp.
Yeah, I know you fish on, for example, today you're fishing on a gravel patch.
Yeah.
You know, a bottom bait. Do you ever worry that hook could dink on the gravel? Do you ever have issues?
It would, but it's only when you reel in. Obviously, as long as if you're hitting the clip, feeding the lead down, that just when it lands, it's not. They're never going to go blunt by hitting the bottom. No. When the bait hits the bottom, the only time you're going to blunt it maybe is if there's a bigger bit of rock out there, and then when you reel it in, obviously it skims across and hits that rock. That's the only way you blunt it. It's never going to sit out there blunt. No. And then another really interesting thing here, which I haven't seen many people do other than yourself, is this looks like some sort of knot on the back of the hook acting as the blowback. You know, a lot of people use a swivel or a ring of some sort. You've got nothing there at all, no metal work, just an overhand knot.
Just an overhand knot. Yeah.
I don't know. I think I tried it once just because it looked a lot tidier. I think I might have even run out of rig rings or something. This would have been when I was a lot younger. So I just tied it with an overhand knot, and it does the same job, but it just looks super tidy. It's just a lot there. I'm not a fan of like loads of metal work and things like that on my rigs. Mm-hmm. So when I've done that, it just looked a lot tidier and a lot neater. But it does exactly the same thing as a rig ring would. Yeah, no, I can see it sort of slight blows back as such, and it is neat. And then you've got a very small gap between that knot and your hook bait. You know, just a couple of mil. Is there a reason for that? Oh, no, I always fish them tight. I just like I just want it all to go in the mouth at the same time. Yeah. I think when they're picking it up, something like a snowman, they're probably sucking it in with a lot of force anyway. I just want the hook to go back as far as it can in their mouth, and at some point it's going to catch hold on its way back out. Yeah, nice. And then sort of finally moving on to the hook bait again. I don't think I've ever seen you fish a small hook bait. They're always quite big, blatant baits. You know, talk to me about that, the logic behind it. They're big fish. Where I've fished normally, there's not loads of fish in there. So I wanted to find that as quick as possible and just pick up the biggest thing. So a lot of time when they're getting greedy, they're probably, in my head, I think they're picking up the most blatant things a lot of the time. Yeah. Because they want to eat it as quick as they can before the other ones do. Yep. And that just looks like a normal sort of snowman rig. Is it what, Yeah,
15 mil.
15 mil bottom bait straight out of the bag, and then a 10 mil pineapple pop up.
And that, yeah, yellow, is that a particular favourite colour?
Yeah, I've done really well on yellow. I think I've just done really well on yellow, regardless of what I use it over, whether I use it over seed or boilie, to be honest.
Yeah. So that was the rig that you were using for many, many years.
Yeah.
Until maybe last year when I noticed a change in your angling to a D rig.
Yeah.
Now I've got the D rig and these are the D rigs you've actually got out now, yeah?
Yeah, exactly the same.
So we've got the 12-pound contour straight through.
Straight through, yeah.
No leader at all.
No leader.
Again, any reason for that? Is there a reason?
After watching sort of the underwater videos, you can see lead core a lot more better than I thought you'd be able to.
Yep.
I mean, realistically, a carp probably isn't going to swim through and see a bit of lead core and think there's a bit of line there, but it's just something else, just a bit more confidence. If you can't see plain line. If you pop that in the edge, you won't be able to see it, especially not when you fish it super flat like that.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's going to be sat completely flat and it's completely unnoticeable to a carp.
Yep. And then again, we've discussed the lead setup, but that is it there.
Yeah.
Hybrid lead clip, distance lead, 4 ounce.
Yeah.
Anti-tangle sleeve, I guess that's a key.
Just helps kick it away, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so this hook link again, it's another long rig, isn't it? We're probably talking, what, 10 inches?
Yeah.
Something like that.
It just gives them a bit more to play with and there's a bit more movement in it, I think.
Yep. And then, what material is this? It's quite supple, isn't it?
That's £20 IQ.
£20 IQ. IQ2 or IQ?
IQ2, sorry, yeah.
£20 IQ2.
But again, you could probably use a 12-pound contour. It's almost, they all just look the same. Like if you put that in the margin, the only reason I use that, it's stiffer than the mainline, but it's quite supple at the same time. But if you popped all that in the edge, you wouldn't see any of it. All you can see is a hook bait and the lead. And
you steaming this rig or?
Yeah. I do give it steam straight out of it because it is where it's obviously coiled up on the thing. When you've cut it off, it will just naturally coil back up.
Steam, it's not, so it's nice and straight.
Yeah, once you steam it, they go straight.
Again, small piece of putty just moulded halfway along that rig.
Yeah, same reason, just so it pins all of it down perfectly on the bottom.
And then moving on to sort of the business end as such, the first thing that I'm drawn to is a large amount of whips on the knotless knot. Talk to me about the reason behind that.
I just think it's tidier and it comes sort of just beyond the point of the hook. I haven't got...
With the whipping,
the whipping does, yeah. So the whipping comes just up past the point of the hook. It's just tidy and it helps to kick it out like that, keep it a bit further away.
So basically, you're creating a bigger D.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Just helps. There's a lot more movement for that swivel to go up and down with the hook bait on. Just help if they pick it up and it spins back, then it's just the hook's got a lot more movement in there. It's sort of more out of the way.
Yeah, nice. And how do you count how many turns you do on that knotless knot?
Yeah, I do 21 turns up and then 2 turns back down, and then put it back through the eye.
So it's quite a lot of turns then. 21 turns down.
Yeah, 21 turns down, 2 back the other way.
2 back the other way. What's the reason for that?
Just helps tighten it. I hold it. So I do 21 up, then 2 back down through the hook, and then I hold both ends. And if you pull it tight, those 2 help grip the other 21 in place.
Yep.
And then it keeps the line coming straight out the hook, like at a straight angle, rather than off. I see some people use them, they come off the side. Right. Which I don't think helps. It helps.
Yeah, I can see that is very neat, I must admit.
Yeah, if you those 2 back down, then you pull it perfectly tight. I hold the line and the hook straight, and pull it in my mouth normally.
The hook, in this case, is it the same hook as your other?
Same hook, yeah. Size 4 Kamakura YGF X.
Nice.
Ridiculously sharp, and they're just strong. I use them for everything, to be perfectly honest.
Yep. And then same hook bait, micro ring swivel.
Micro ring swivel, yeah, and then just a bit of bait floss. That's the same hook bait on there. Then just blobbed off on top. And
how have you found the D rig since been using it? Because I mean, looking at the other rig, it's probably got that little bit more movement down towards the hook end with that strip section. This is still, it's still relatively stiff. You can see it's always going to kick away. But do you ever fear that?
I think realistically they fish. Really, they do kind of fish the same.
Yeah.
I haven't found that I've caught any more or any less. I don't know. I basically tied one up because a lot of my friends use them, and they're so much quicker and easier to tie. Like when you're catching a lot of fish quick, I found them a lot easier.
So that's the reason for the switch, because obviously you've got so many fish on that rig. I was thinking, why has he changed the rig that he's used and caught so many big ones on, doesn't lose any fish, and now you're using a different rig? I'm thinking.
But they do the same thing. Like if you hold them both like that, both of them. So when the fish has sucked them in, they both end up sat like that.
Yeah.
They both pretty much identical when you hold them like that.
Yeah. So the only reason is ease of tying.
And where like been fishing on here is super clear. So obviously, like I mentioned before, that contour, you can't see it, and that IQ2, you can't see it. Whereas that, when you do put it on the bottom, you can see it. Just, obviously, I don't think it makes that much difference.
No.
But just confident, when I'm fishing straight through, I think it looks a lot neater to fish a straight through fluoro, and then to a...
And this is that slightly, I guess you probably are kicking, probably presenting that a little bit more, aren't you, in this rig maybe?
That, where it's a little bit stiffer, probably kicks away a bit more. Like that obviously cools up a lot easier. Whereas that on that anti-tangle sleeve should kick away a lot straighter.
So talk to me sort of through like a normal session with for Oscar. So let's say you arrive to like Friday afternoon after work, you've got a couple of nights ahead of you, you got into the swim, you know, sort of summarise it. What do? You have a quick lead arounds and then spot out, 3 rods out there.
I'll try and find them the best I can, but it's dependent on what you can find. I'll find a clear zone. I'll wrap it up, make sure it's all right, wrap all the rods up to the same zone, get my rig sorted. I'll get 3 rods out there, D rigs, maggot rigs, and then I'll just spom 3/4 of what I've got left of the gallon and just save a little bit just for some spare hook baits and mesh bags if I do catch a few.
And if you get, let's say you spotted the bait out, 3 rods out, you know, a couple of hours into dark, 3-4 hours into dark, you've had a bite, you've got a carp, are you topping the spot up? Because you've put so much bait out there, do you think?
Yeah, with maggots, I don't know. I've never really seen them feed. It'd be interesting to watch them feed on maggots underwater to see how many they actually eat at once, because obviously a gallon of maggots is a lot of actual individual maggots. So it's not realistically a lot of bait, but it's a lot of individual maggots. And if they're only eating them like 1, 2 at a time, they could be there for ages to clear that up.
Yeah.
But yeah, without actually seeing, I won't, if I've just got the night, then I'd only bring 1 gallon with me anyway.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be able to put any more bait out. But if I've got a couple of nights instead, caught like 4, I wouldn't like introduce any more bait until I've caught like 3 or 4 probably.
Okay.
And then if I had, say I was doing 2 nights and I had another gallon with me, I'd probably put like another 5 or 6 bombs out there. Yeah. Just because they probably, if you're catching 4 fish over like 5-6 hours, realistically they've eaten like 90% of that maggot, because there's going to be a lot more than just those 4 fish out there.
Yeah, nice. And then hook bait wise, again, we touch on the big hook baits. I know you're using big hook baits over the maggot, which again, a lot of people might just use 2 or 3 maggots or a little 10 miller. You're using a huge hook bait. What's the reason for that? I
think when they're out there just eating them, like obviously 1 or 2 at a time, which is what I imagine they're doing. Maybe they can get like 4 or 5 if they're tight, but when they're out there, they're obviously probably competing with other fish. So they're going to want to try and eat them as quick as they can. And with that massive ball of maggot, I can imagine they just home straight in on that.
How are you setting this hook bait up? What have you got? Have you got is it a wafter you have and then the maggots? Or?
Yeah, no, so I've got half a like milky toffee pop-up, cut that in half, and then I put like 30 maggots, thread it onto the bait floss, and then just tie it off into a knot.
And do you count how many maggots, or are you just guessing?
Nah, I normally count, unless I'm distracted whilst I'm trying to time my race.
30?
Yeah, always 30. Well, anything from 30 to like 36.
That's quite a big ball of maggots, isn't it?
Yeah.
And how's that sitting in the water? Is that those maggots sort of sitting above the pop-up?
They sit just above the pop-up. Like it sinks really nice and slow with like half on those pop-ups.
And the hook's laying flat, is it, on the deck?
Yeah, hook's flat, and then the maggots are sort of just. Sometimes they do edge to the side a bit, but regardless, like you can barely see the pop-up a lot of the time.
And it's just onto the bait floss, overhand, not just to lock it all down.
Just to lock it all down, yeah. And fish them tight, because sometimes when they go out there, if you don't tie those knots properly, the maggots slide back up the bait floss and the rig looks awful. So I do like 3 overhand knots just to make sure it stays tight, and I tie them down as tight as I can without pulling them all off.
Yep. Yeah, nice. And then obviously that's through the winter months. When do you know, or when do you decide to change from maggots to other bait? Like last May, I know, for example, we were out and you were putting lots and lots of seed out there. When is that transition period?
When they wake up, I think. Once they're a bit more active, the water's sort of warmed up a bit more. That's when I sort of make the change. Say, it depends. Every year is different. Do you know what I mean? So, April, May, come towards the end of April, start of May is when I'll swap to start using seed. Just because they're a lot more active, they're up for it as well. And I don't think maggots are particularly great for a venue, and I don't like for the water or for the fish. They're not going to grow if you keep feeding them maggots. You can catch them all year long, I think, on maggot. Depending on the small fish as well, that's another reason I would sort of tend to stop using them. Once those small fish are a lot more active, come end of April, May, they'll clear up your maggots and tench. They'll become a lot more active and start clearing up your maggot as well. Yeah. And then you've just got the problem of you're constantly getting all your maggots pecked off by small fish, and you're catching tench, which you'll catch tench anyway, but I find that tench as well are a lot more attractive to a maggot. You catch a lot more tench when maggot fishing than you would fishing over seed or boilie.
Yeah, and then, so that seed and boilie nut sort of style.
It comes into it, yeah, sort of May time, and it's just more to get away from the nuisance fish and to feed them a bit more, just to give them something that they actually want. I think they probably get bored of maggots, to be perfectly honest, after a while, because it's not doing anything for them. They need to eat something that's going to like bulk them back up. They've sat around all winter, not really doing a lot. Been caught, they've used everything that they've eaten in the autumn and like used as reserves. They've used all that through the winter, so they need something that's going to fill them back up. So they want to start eating things like seed and boilie. Well, look at this one. Put out another big hit of seed last night, and yeah, it's fair to say he's definitely been on it. I've only sort of caught him just before first light, and I've had him in a retainer an hour or so. He's covered in hemp. The retainer's full of hemp and corn. So yeah, big hits of bait, tail end of spring, definitely a good tactic.
What is your go-to spring mix? What would you put in it?
Again, depending on where I fish, if there's a lot of fish in there, I'll use a lot of seed, nut. So hemp, crushed nut, boilie crumb, corn, something like that. That's probably my go-to mix. That'd be what I'd use most of the time. And then if there's not actually a lot of fish in there, just pure boilie.
Yeah.
Mainly for the fact that if you've not got a lot of fish feeding on top of you, I think it takes a bit longer for them to pick up your hook baits when you're fishing overseas and stuff.
Yeah.
They feed a lot slower and they don't move as much. Whereas if you say you're fishing a big lake with not a lot of fish in there, the pure boilie, they're just going around picking up individual boilies here, there and everywhere. Yeah. But they'll come across your hook bait a lot quicker than they will feeding on a big bucket full of like seed.
And when you are fishing over that seed, as I say, as we were last May, you had a really good session. You had several 30-pounders.
Yeah.
On the D-rig.
On the D-rig,
on the snowman hook bait. So again, you're fishing little bits and pieces, hemp, crushed boilie.
Yeah. But
you're still using this massive hook bait. Again,
something for them to home in on again. Just a big hook bait, something that they're going to pick up a lot quicker.
Yeah.
But it's what I've always done, and I think I've had a lot of, I have tried using smaller hook baits, but I just, in my head, how I picture them out there feeding, when they see that bigger hook bait, they're going to pick that up first.
Yeah. So this rig then, the D-rig, that is working for you, be it, you know, winter, spring or summer.
Yeah.
Fishing over maggots, hemp, boilie.
Anything, yeah.
And if you're fishing over, let's say, loads of 15, 18 mil pure boilie, you're just going to use a snowman or something?
I could use a snowman, or depending on if, a lot of time with pure boilie, I could just use a 50 mil wafter. Or a 50 mil bottom bait straight out of the bag with a little stringer on it, something like that maybe. I've done a bit of that, like when I done a guest with Johnny, I know they just like pure boilie, and I don't think they're a fan of pop-ups too much in there. Right. So using what you know, but you can, obviously with a D-rig, you can use anything you want on it.
So it's versatile?
Yeah, it's really versatile, yeah.
Nice, nice. And then probably another thing I just want to pick your brains on while I'm here, and something I'm sure a lot of people will want to ask you. Obviously, you are a very successful angler. You've caught a lot of big fish for a young guy. I mean, how many 40s have you had now? Do you even know?
Fucking hell, it's heavy.
Yeah.
Drop its head a little bit.
I can't even hold it.
You put it on your knee. That's a mental thing. But it's the nicest one in here, mate, definitely.
If you're a youngster or a guy out there looking to sort of, you know, up your catch rate, try and get amongst these bigger fish. You know, it all seems so simple when I'm sat here with you talking about it. I'm just using a D-rig, but I know there's so much more to your angling than just casting out a gallon of maggot and fishing a D-rig. What do you think are your biggest edges? Little things that you do that maybe somebody else wouldn't do, the other guys around the lake aren't probably doing. What do you do?
Just spending as much time at the lake, spend as much time at the lake as you can, regardless of whether you're fishing, just trying to pop in to have a look. If you could pop in the day before you fish and just walk around for 2 hours, at least it gives you an idea of where they are, depending on if they're showing or what the weather's doing. You can just have a look around, and then using your time, I still work 5 days a week, but using your time to your advantage. So fishing, use your fishing time when the weather's perfect for it. So if you've got like a nice big weather coming in, like a big weather front coming in, like a big southerly in March or April, that's prime. If you have to take an extra Friday off to beat a few people there, just use your holiday as an advantage to get there before other people and when the weather's perfect, or on a full moon. Like, I prefer a couple of days. Say a full moon was on a Saturday, I think the build up to a full moon is probably better. So I'd take a Friday off, and then I'd fish the Thursday, Friday, Saturday night.
Yeah.
And then even go home on the Sunday. If I really think it's on, go on. Even if I haven't caught, but I still think it's on. I'd go home on the Sunday, have a shower, get everything I need ready for work, and then I can come back and do Sunday and go straight to work on a Monday. It's just making the most of your time. You could use loads of excuses like, oh, I work full time, I don't have the time. But you can use your holiday to take advantage of like perfect opportunities.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I can't. What I do cleaning windows, I can't turn up at people's houses on a Saturday and a Sunday really.
Yeah.
So I can't change my 2 days off to like a Monday and a Tuesday, which I wish I could.
Yeah.
But I can't. So I have to balance it round the weekend.
Yeah.
But it's just me choosing which day. I could take a Monday off and then as a day's holiday.
Yeah.
But it's choosing which day and just working it around the weather. I think that is using the weather and your holiday and moon phases to your advantage is probably the biggest edge in carp fishing.
And then that being said, you know, even if it's a full moon and everything's going in your favour, you've got big southerly, mild weather, at the end of the day, you've still got to catch them. So, you know, what are you doing when you're in these zones, when it's game on? You still got to make it happen. So, you know, let's talk about attention for detail, for example. Like, I know you're so meticulous with your rigs and getting those rods out.
Yeah. You've got to make sure everything's perfect. I can't sit behind something that I think I've half done. Or if I'm not 100% confident that that rod hit the clip properly or went down properly, you've just got to fish 100% like the best you can possibly fish whenever you fish.
Yeah.
Especially people who don't have as much time as other people.
Yeah.
You need to be fishing like 110%.
Yeah.
Like to the best of your abilities. Like spomming accurate, rods out, bang on. You need to get your rods out, your bait out, and then sit down and think, I couldn't have done that any better.
So you need to know you've done everything in your power. So if they turn up, there's no other excuse. It's either they're not here or if they're there, I'm catching them. That's the mindset.
Yeah.
And then sort of lastly, maybe let's sort of touch on the drive of your fishing. You know, I know it's everything for you. I know you make huge sacrifices. All you guys make huge sacrifices. I see what you guys put into your fishing. You know, it's easy to say, oh yeah, he does loads of time, but I know there is so much more to it than that. There's a lot of guys doing 2-3 nights a week.
Yeah.
But you know, to then have the consistent rewards that you have, where does that drive come from?
Wanting to catch fish, just enjoying it, but at the same time, like wanting to catch particular fish. They're not going to be around forever, and I could fish. You could fish forever, and you're not always going to catch everything you want. So when you want to catch a fish, just having that drive to get out and catch it, just making the most of every opportunity you can to actually go and catch them.
Yeah.
And just dedicating as much time as possible to catching them fish. Just being, I don't know, just like little things, just being driven enough to like wake up and set an alarm at like 1 o'clock in the morning to get up and stand out there for half an hour, just see if you can hear anything, to use everything you possibly can to your advantage to catch you more fish. It's just just motivating yourself to do stuff, I think.
Yeah.
Like I could easily sleep through all night, but if I'm like not 100% confident that I'm on them, even if I am 100% confident, I want to get up in the night and stand there, dead silence, like not on my phone, like not getting up on my phone, it's making the tea and things like that. I want to get up, just stand there and see if I can hear something, just find out where they are. Make sure you're still there. Just being driven enough to, like a lot of people drive a long way, mate, to go fishing, to like certain places because they want to catch fish. That's like the drive that you need to catch big fish.
Yeah, nice. Well, I think that ends it perfectly. I think I'm absolutely gasping for a cup of tea.
Yeah, same.
I think that we've covered pretty much everything about your angling there. So
we need to go and catch one now.
We do. Well, you do.
I do, yeah. Well, yeah, you caught one.
I did. But no, put the kettle on, mate. Yeah, thanks for that.
No, that's right, mate. No problem at all.
Lovely carp, that, Oscar. Got a slate grey colour.
Yeah, he's
so nice.
Well, how about that? Following on from mine and Tom's chat yesterday, I did mention it's pretty apparent that I think I needed to move. Done a couple of laps of the lake, found some fish up the top end, deployed a good helping of maggot onto a hard spot with 3 D-rigs, as I mentioned before. Nice and accurate, and yeah, this is the result. This is the biggest one of 3, 37 pounder. Absolutely nailed on that super sharp Kamakura. Yeah, super happy with this one.